and welcome to Passing the Mic, a series of conversations that will explore the issues that matter most to school leaders, teachers, students, and parents. I'm Sashelle Harris. While all students were impacted during the pandemic, remote and hybrid learning scenarios exacerbated many existing opportunity gaps. In response, the state of Massachusetts created the Acceleration Roadmap to help students achieve success both in the present and the future. In the second of a three-part conversation series, partner of the Northeast region, Dr. Jack Perry, sits down with district leaders to discuss the groundbreaking work the state is doing. We hope you enjoy this conversation. Jack, take it away.
Thank you, Sashelle. Well, it's great to be here with you all. My name is Jack Perry. I am a partner here at TNTP, and I have the pleasure of being joined by three wonderful folks from here in the Northeast, my home. They are coming to us from the big state of Massachusetts. And, about a year and a half ago in the summer of 2020, TNTP and the Department of Education for Secondary and Elementary Education in Massachusetts had an opportunity to embark on a partnership to provide and think about educational experiences for kids across Massachusetts and staff across Massachusetts who were dealing with, as we all were, the pandemic and the impact of the pandemic on education and the state of education. And I think we all knew at that time that we needed to do things a little bit differently. And that meant a focus on learning acceleration, which we know is a buzzword that we've all incorporated into our vocabulary sense. But we also know that learning acceleration in theory is not new practice, that it is just what good teaching and instruction is, and good supports for teachers and leaders and their students. So with that, we wanted to welcome our good folks here from Taunton Public Schools in Massachusetts. And I want to start by allowing them to introduce themselves. So want to start with Elizabeth. Elizabeth, if you could tell us a little bit about your role and how long you've been in Taunton, that would be great.
Thank you. I'm Elizabeth Pawlowski, and I am the Director of Curriculum for STEM pre-K to 12. So I oversee science and math instruction in Taunton. I've been in Taunton since 2001, where I started as a biology teacher at the high school and have done curriculum leadership work in science and now math since then.
Thanks for kicking us off, Elizabeth. Let's pass it to Chris.
My name is Chris Baratta. I'm the Assistant Superintendent for Curriculum Instruction here in Taunton. I've been in this role, actually, I'm concluding my third year in this role. And prior to that, I actually served principal in 2 middle schools and also Director of Student Services and Transportation. So all told, 16 years in the district and 31 in the field of education.
Last but not least, John.
Hi, my name is John Cabral. I'm the superintendent here in the Taunton Public Schools, starting, I should say, my 4th year as superintendent. This is my 26th year in education, and 24 of those 26 years have been spent here in Taunton, starting as a classroom teacher, assistant principal, assistant superintendent, and now I have the pleasure of serving as a superintendent here in the great city of Taunton.
Thank you all. It's great to be here with you. We know that you all are busy. So really this conversation is meant to really get into some of the great work you all have done, but bigger than that, sharing that with other educators that are in your seats and hoping that they can learn from this. So I want to kick us off with an initial question that I want to direct to you, John. Over the past 2 years or so, district and school leaders have been pulled in a variety of directions. We know that happens every school year, but this particular school year, when we think about the work that you all started about a year and a half ago, why did you decide as a district to focus on learning acceleration, and what has the impact been?
That's a great question, because so much has changed in a matter of 18 months, 2 years. And we knew and I think everyone realizes that our students lost a lot. Not only did they lose a lot academically, they also lost a lot when it came to their social, emotional, and mental health. But with regards to education, we knew it would be difficult to go back and try to remediate or to replicate what was lost throughout the pandemic. So we felt as a school system that it was important to meet the kids where they are now. Where they are now, utilizing scaffolding and supports to help our students access prior knowledge, we believe was the best remedy to get our students to where they need to be, to help get them caught up over a 2 to 3, 4 year period. So we also were very mindful here in Taunton, and Chris and Liz have done a great job reminding our principals, reminding our staff that we're not expecting to fix this in 1 year. What our students lost cannot be fixed in 1 year. They cannot be caught up in 1 year. We know it's going to be a multi-year process. So when we think about acceleration, we've been very mindful with our messaging that it's not acceleration that's going to take place over a 1 year period. It's learning acceleration that's going to be conducted over a several year period to get our students back to where they were pre-pandemic. And what it's led to, and again, I got to give all the credit to Chris and Liz and our curriculum leaders and our principals. What it's led to is high quality instructional materials in 3 out of our 4 major content areas. We have high quality instructional materials in reading and English. We have high quality instructional materials in the area of math. And we also have high quality instructional materials in the area of science. And what I've enjoyed most throughout this process is how we've seen a dramatic shift here in Taunton to being very student-centered versus the opposite, which was very staff-driven. So we have great teachers, they do great work, but to think that our teachers can accelerate learning, differentiate learning for all our students in throughout our school system, and we're 8,000 strong. And we felt it was very important to set the bar, to have a minimum standard that's very high with the high quality instructional materials, to scaffold and support and supplement as needed to make sure that we are lifting all students, not just reaching those in the middle or above.
Appreciate you kicking us off, John. Certainly want to allow Elizabeth and Chris to weigh in on why you all, decided to make this a priority.
Sure. Well, I think from a district perspective, Jack, to be honest to say that you have 3 of the district leaders representing Taunton Public Schools here, but the reality is we probably should have about 700 cells on this conversation, because what takes place in the classroom is really at the granular level why we do what we do in each day. So what we impart on you today really is reflective of the hard work of all of our educators, from our classroom teachers, our educational assistants, our custodial staff, cafeteria staff, school adjustment counselors, assistant principals, all the way down the line. So it really emanates from our strategic plan that Superintendent Cabral really refined and brought us to as a touchstone of what are our core values, right? So we were in the draft process prior to the pandemic hitting. So when, everything fell apart, that was our touchstone, our core values. Basically, how can we put ourselves in the child's seat from their perspective? How best can we provide high quality instruction to them? And that led us to looking at the accelerated roadmap, right? And the coordination between TNTP and DESE in terms of what you mentioned earlier in our side conversation, Jack, is really ultimately best practices. So as an urban district, we had pre-existing gaps, learning gaps with our students from the standards. That was exacerbated by the pandemic. Now, how do you really close that gap in a timely fashion so our students are back on track and successful? And it is, as Superintendent Cabral mentioned, a multi-year effort. And that's why we're relying on a strategic plan and looking at developing professional cultures and learning cultures for our teachers, managing our resources, and really hitting home the point of human resources, right? What's most important for us is the children, but also the adults we put in front of them and provide them the tools to be successful, curriculum instruction assessment, and then family engagement, because it truly is a partnership now more than anything, going back to when our parents and caregivers and for the teachers in their living rooms for a good portion of the year. And I think now we have that common ground of, okay, so how can we emerge from the pandemic much stronger than we entered into it March of 2020?
I mean, we don't refocus how we impact those interactions between students and teachers in the classroom. The normal sense that teachers will have is I really need to get them up to grade level and up to grade level. And if we have that methodology, we will never, the grade level continues and we will never catch up. So applying this new strategy is the best way to get kids just-in-time supports, right? How do we get our students to this targeted point by the end without holding them back? So just changing our language and changing our focus has been really important during this year.
I'm taking some notes as I'm hearing you all speak about, why you decided to engage in the work. And I appreciate hearing that, business as usual was not the approach that was going to work here. And I also appreciate that this is not something that was thought of as a magic bullet. This wasn't going to change, learning acceleration and these different approaches were not going to change circumstances overnight. And I think oftentimes we come with that orientation when we have a big problem to solve. It makes me wonder about, and also, Chris, you mentioned the core values that you all had just established prior to the pandemic. It makes me wonder about investment and how you all went about investing your staff in some of these changes that you were bringing about. Can one of you speak to that?
I don't mind kicking that one off too, because change is hard, right? I mean, any type of change, especially systemic change, is difficult, especially when you're working in a system as large as ours. So we felt the reason for our change was communicated and shared. And as Chris mentioned, prior to the pandemic, we already had these existing gaps. We already knew that there were holes in our curriculum. There was holes in our platform that we were utilizing at the time, that we were missing a large number of students. So we felt that this was important for us to make this concerted effort to utilize the resources that we provided during the pandemic, which, quite frankly, if it wasn't for these additional resources that we received, school systems like ours, we struggle to provide high quality instructional materials, just because when we purchase a curriculum, you're talking nearly a 7-digit budget purchase. And that's a liability that many school systems, unfortunately, such as urban school systems, it's difficult to budget for. So the additional resources that we received, and we also saw this as a net opportunity to address an inequity that existed in urban school centers in schools in Southeastern Massachusetts. Now we are able to purchase high quality instructional materials. You're probably going to get tired of hearing me use that term, but I am very excited to say that we can purchase high quality instructional materials that we believe will make a huge difference, a great difference in the lives of our students, to better prepare them and put them on par with surrounding communities that don't have the same struggles that we may have when it comes to giving our kids the materials, giving our teachers the materials, evidence-based, research-based. They've been proven to work when implemented correctly. So as a superintendent, to be able to provide our students, our staff, and our families with those resources, this is, for me, is going to be I believe is going to be a game changer for communities such as Taunton.
If I can add to that about buy-in, we have to just be clear here. This is difficult. This has been a really difficult process for us because it's hard. Change is hard. And when educators are scrappy, they're used to really creating amazing learning experience just with some standards and some resources. And we have these incredible educators. And now it seems almost counterintuitive to provide educators with everything they need to make those experiences happen in the classroom, these asset-based, student-centered, amazing, hands-on experiences happen. They're like, oh, wait a minute, am I irrelevant now? because that's been the general sense. So what we've been doing is honoring, kind of modeling what we wish to see in the classroom, helping teachers see that their energy now doesn't have to be focused on looking for things and hunting for that perfect activity, and instead, because it's here, it's right in front of you, they can spend their energy getting to know those actual students in front of them and really coming up with these specific interventions, listening to their exact conversations that can drive instruction further or in a different direction. We're helping them see that their energy that they had, that community that they already built, can still happen and happen even in a better way, in hopes that when they're in the classroom, students can see that they came to this classroom with an amazing amount of knowledge and they are worthy of being there and they can drive instruction.
I'd say, Jack, as the district leadership level, really it's our responsibility to shepherd our staff and our children and put them in positions where they're going to be successful. And that means removing barriers. So, like as John mentioned about the equity of materials, right? Providing high quality curriculum materials for every child to be able to access. So how do we remove barriers from teachers who feel overwhelmed, right? And as Elizabeth mentioned, we have some phenomenal instructors with extreme talents, and somehow using a touchstone as the high quality curriculum material, saying, okay, now, not that you don't have to worry about that, but that's one thing off your plate that you can really focus on your instructional practices versus culling all this information, which then leads to inequities in instruction from classroom to classroom, grade level to grade level, across different buildings, because we have phenomenal teachers who do what it has to do to make it successful for the child, which then tends to, bifurcate all of your efforts. And then for the child experience going through, the continuum is broken. And just like Superintendent Cabral mentioned, when we looked at our curriculum materials and our unit planning stuff, it was disjointed from one level to another across buildings. And if you put yourself into the child's perspective, I could go to one teacher and this is the language I hear of a certain content. And I go to the next room for whatever reason. Maybe I transfer a room and it's totally different. And that's how we're not setting the stage for student success because of a systemic difference, right? And that's something that we really looked at about aligning our systems in place so that we can get the most efficiency and productivity out of everyone, the child, the teacher, the administrators, the guidance counselors, all those systems of supports that we try to align ourselves with DESE's, the multi-tiered system of support model.
And Jack, if I could just reiterate, and I think the important piece that we should have probably started with, and what I would encourage administrators throughout the states to think long and hard about, is listening. I have to commend Chris and Liz for the work that they've done listening to staff. So remember, as you eloquently articulated to begin this, we're coming out of a pandemic and we're trying to get kids caught up to where they are or where they should be. But we've also lost a lot of learning and we're implementing a new program. So staff feel stressed, students feel stressed, families feel stressed. So when implementing a new program, listening to our staff, hearing what they feel is needed, maybe making some tweaks, making some adjustments, making some modifications to pacing or to scope and sequence. Listening to the staff to make sure that, one, the implementation of the program is successful and that there is buy-in, because we are listening and making adjustments on the fly, just like we did throughout the pandemic. We're making adjustments on the fly to better support our teachers, which ultimately better supports our students. And I have to give a lot of credit to Chris and Liz because they are boots on the ground in the classrooms, interacting with staff, interacting with our principals and listening to our kids and then reporting back. And then from there, we make the modifications as a team.
The change management process, you just can't underestimate, the work that needs to go into it. And when I hear you talk about implementing new curriculum at any time, even when things are going great, is the heaviest lift, a district can face. Never mind, trying to do it coming off of a pandemic. So for those districts that are listening, what have you learned? I mean, you said it, you touched on a little bit of it, John, you talked about, the importance of listening, right? And knowing how folks are responding and feeling about what you're asking them to do. But what are some of the main things you've learned about this process of introducing, high quality curriculum materials, and what you heard from staff and where you needed to maybe reevaluate your plans?
I can only, what I've heard, and full disclosure, I have 2 students at home who attend Taunton High School. So I heard an earful in September. It was a new program, very different than how they were being taught prior to the implementation of this program. So I heard a lot of why, Dad, why now, Dad? So I echo what you stated. It's never a good time. So before I talk about what I'm seeing now, I just want to reiterate to all our superintendents and district leaders in Massachusetts and throughout the states, it's never a good time. But we felt that it was important to implement now because we knew it was going to be a disruptive year. We knew it was going to be a disruptive year, and we want to be in a position to be very successful. I mean, I use the analogy of the rising phoenix. So we want to be in a position where we take our lumps, we learn our hard lessons now during a very disruptive year, knowing that next fall, as things hopefully become more normalized, we'll be in a better position because we took our lumps, we learned some hard lessons now during a very disjointed year to really hit the ground running and better support our students, knowing that staff have had a year under difficult conditions to learn a new curriculum where they'll be able to implement very successfully the following year. What I'm seeing now and what I'm hearing now, and this is a true story, I was driving home from Boston with 3 teenagers, 3 10th graders from Taunton High School in the back seat. And what I heard from the teenagers was that the program, now that they are used to it, it's much easier and their grades are improving as they spend more time with this new program. So the students are seeing the benefit of this phenomenon, inquiry-based, high-quality instructional materials. And I'm also seeing and feeling that teachers, the longer that they have utilized this program, because we did have teachers who piloted during the pandemic year, those teachers are being very successful or are not feeling the struggles that the first-year teachers implementing this program are feeling. So just like with anything, as you mentioned with change, the more staff become acclimated with the processes and understand the supports that are in place, I believe the better this implementation will be the following year. So that's why we were adamant about rolling it out this year, knowing, as you said, it's never a good year, whether conditions are great or whether conditions are like they are now coming out of a pandemic.
I would say to everything John said, and really listening and to educators and making change. So initially we went to this process and I thought, well, I'm just going to be in every professional development too, so I can be involved. That's not enough. You have to be in classrooms so that when you are celebrating wins with teachers, which of course everybody should be doing, there are specific phrases you can use. There are specific teacher moves that you can celebrate so that you're validating the effort and the change that educators are making in front of one another. Sharing, like getting your champions and having educators who may be struggling, implementing and shifting their practice, having them come and view teachers who are just like knocking it out of the park. That has been incredible because the focus of us being the leaders is shifted. The teachers are now becoming leaders of one another. And that has been really the greatest growth point. That's when we kind of saw that exponential kind of shift, like where things felt okay. Like this is going to be okay. And just giving people grace. Tears, I can't grade in the same way. That's okay. How do you think you want to grade now? And just giving people space to be just be okay with change and not doing it right now. As long as it's right by the kids, we're okay. So really being just being with the teachers and with the students and having real data to share is qualitative data to share is super important.
It was difficult, Jack, to be honest with you, during the early stage, because really we looked at when experience and opportunity intersect. And our experience with our curriculum was very disjointed and really did not address the needs of our students. And then, as bad as it was with the pandemic, collaborating with, for example, DESE, with some of their the grant fundings, TNTP, and look about, we can really leverage our resources at that time to make a change. And quite honestly, to both what John and Elizabeth talked about is those feedback cycles, right? So not only do we expect and encourage and support feedback cycles within the classroom between student and educator, and what do we learn from that? But then all of a sudden from the classroom out to the building administrator and the teacher, what are we hearing? What are we seeing? How do we need to adjust? And then as John discusses at the district level, what are we hearing from administrators that we need? So there's a continuous circles going on that it's not the Ronco method of education where you set it and forget it any longer. We really have to go back and find and refine and address the needs that come up, acknowledge that there are going to be problems that emerge, but then collaborating with each other and how best to solve it, but stay the course. Because many times I walked next door, Superintendent Cabral's office, said, John, I think we're going too fast, maybe back out. And he was reassuring, no, it's right. And I knew in my heart was right, but you sort of got worn down because you hear that from teachers. This is frustrating, it's difficult. Elementary teachers who are generalists going through revisions, right? 2 new revisions out of the 5 subject areas they're teaching is overwhelming, right? For the daily struggles. So how do you reassure them? How do you keep them going? How do you keep them afloat? More importantly, how do we keep addressing the needs of our students was really a challenge, and we're still emerging from it. So it's unfinished business.
And then the only last piece I would like to also mention that I think we haven't touched upon yet is we were also strategic with who we partnered with. So we did bring in a math consultant to help support this work, which has been instrumental. Because we also want to make sure that as a school system, that we are implementing the new curriculum with fidelity as well. So having the consultant to support Liz, support Chris, support our principals, and be in the classrooms to make sure that we are implementing this correctly. Now that was also a very wise and strategic move, and a move, quite frankly, that we would not have been able to do if it wasn't for the additional resources we received due to the pandemic.
Thanks for adding that. As I'm thinking about our listeners, other district leaders like yourselves, thinking about how they can, continue to either think about implementation, monitor implementation of, new curriculum. I'm thinking about systems and structures that you've established that are helping this work succeed. I was in a school yesterday where we were doing some walkthroughs. We're supporting the school with new ELA curriculum in a high school, and the district office is literally directly across the street from this high school, right? So, there should be no excuse in terms of like monitoring and accountability, et cetera, right? But I'm thinking about, systems and structures that you've set up so that school leaders and principals really feel supported in this work. Can you talk about some of the systems and structures that you've either improved upon or that you've established to ensure that this work succeeds and is sustainable?
Yeah, I'll tee this one up, Chris and Liz, and please feel free to contribute because you can probably provide more in-depth and more detail than I'm about to. So what you just identified, Jack, began during our all-admin retreat. During our all-admin retreat back in August, which was a 2-day retreat with about 70 administrators, and we discussed the importance of having look-for tools. And Mr. Baratta, under his leadership and working with Liz and other supports, we started the process of creating a math look-for tool. And we also set the goal, very ambitious goal, that we were going to conduct regular walkthroughs. But the walkthroughs were going to be communicated with staff, that they were going to be identified, they were going to know prior to the walkthroughs, what it was that our administrators, whether it's individual administrators or teams of administrators conducting the walkthroughs, what they were going to be looking for. And then we also made, we also agreed as a group that we would report out in general terms, the GLOWs in areas or the why, or ask some of those questions with a curiosity lens, because we don't want to, a couple of reasons. We don't want to identify staff or make staff feel like they're being monitored, but we also want staff to feel free to take risks, knowing that that they're not going to be punished if a lesson or if something didn't go right that they were expecting during a walkthrough. So it was a little bit of a change in the culture here in Taunton with the more regularly scheduled walkthroughs or team walkthroughs. So, but we feel between the look for tools, the walkthroughs, the use of our consultants, as a group, as principals, we've started the work of helping our principals to identify the standards, making and utilizing video clips of teaching to see if principals can identify if the standard is being taught correctly, and also to help principals identify scaffolding. What is scaffolding? So that's work that we've done as a leadership team that we hope will make its way, or we anticipate will make its way back to the building level. Liz, Chris, please feel free.
So John just spoke of like this up sort of upper approach here. So I thought this is great because I'm thinking from like the kind of from the classroom out approach. So we have monthly curriculum meetings where teachers meet either within the building as a curriculum group, or because of, one of the great things about the pandemic is that we're able to meet virtually now, which is something we never would have considered. So where teachers are meeting across the district during these times. In science specifically, we're utilizing even additional meeting times where teachers are coming and planning together. And in math, we're having those as well through the consultants and at other levels just during the day. So administrators working together to cover classroom, which is, I'm going to say, almost impossible in some buildings given COVID, but they're still doing it so that teachers can come together either during the day or after school to plan together and scaffolds together. So that's been extremely helpful.
Well, I guess I'll go in between both in terms of we really want to develop a system of learners, not only student learners, but adult learners, and understand we all come with great strengths and areas of opportunity to learn. And the pandemic has brought that out. We have some phenomenal teachers who, because of the structures we have in place, aren't allowed to really share their talents and common planning time. So we had to break down those barriers. They could share their successes and their challenges and hear from one another. So trying to really foster a collaborative learning environment for educators to share their ideas and bounce things out was really pivotal because, we all work stronger together, right? Administratively within the buildings, we begin to develop instructional leadership teams for that distributive leadership model. Again, we're all not we're incapable of knowing everything, regardless of what role you are in the district. So it's really taking advantage of that wealth of knowledge to identify problems, provide potential solutions to those problems, and then go on out and test your theories and see if they come true and what you can do to alter. So the look for tools really provided a lens for our administrators who may not feel comfortable evaluating certain areas. Starting out, okay, let's look at basic structures of lessons. It's a very soft landing spot, but non-threatening for everybody. And then we're lifting and shifting towards, now let's look more clearly at the instructional practices that are taking place and also the tasks that you're assigning. Are the tasks as rigorous as the standard is, or are we missing the mark in some way? So that is an ongoing work, what will always be ongoing work. So we're at maybe the toddler stage of that development now, but with something that we're definitely going to be focusing on and building as we move forward.
Yeah, and I just thought of another piece, another structure that we were able to put into our schools, and you'll be happy to know, Jack, that our offices, or at least Chris and our offices are located in an elementary school, so there's no excuse for us to do observations or walkthroughs. But the other area where I thought we were strategic in utilizing our federal funding over the next 3 years was to bring back instructional coaches, which was a position that was cut prior to the pandemic when many school systems had to make some really hard decisions regarding personnel. And we also brought in additional assistant principals. So as Liz mentioned, now you have a team, because before the way our building was structured, it was difficult for the principal or the assistant principal to get into the classrooms because they were being pulled in so many different directions because of the day-to-day management of the buildings. So by providing additional administrative staff, having the coaches back in the buildings, our focus coming out of the pandemic was to get our students reacclimated to being back in school. We were going to focus on accelerating learning, and we were going to keep a close eye on COVID. So I feel by making sure that we had COVID on the back burner, but again, paying attention to it, but we weren't letting COVID drive the train this year the way it had been driving the train the last year and a half. So having those additional resources to go into the classrooms, support staff, to make sure that staff are on the right track as far as implementation of the curriculum, and having the coaches to analyze the data and really ask those questions, those probing questions with teachers. I believe that's what's helping us to be successful.
We're coming up on time here, and I want to sincerely thank you all for what you're doing for the kids, staff, and families of Taunton, and also by providing your thoughts here and what they might mean for the district leaders that are watching. I want to allow each of you to leave with sort of a parting word or sort of thought for folks that are watching as you think about this work, what you've learned. What would you say to folks that are watching this, that are thinking about whether it's I think we need to try to create a method to get teachers more invested in the curriculum that we've chosen, or we're trying to better understand how kids and families are feeling about this particular choice at our district. What parting thoughts would you have? And let's go in reverse order here. Maybe we can start with Elizabeth, go to John, and then Chris.
So I would say, when it comes to high quality instructional materials, there's a huge shift to be student focused and asset focused. And so I think that if we're trying to get buy-in from educators and families, let's talk to kids. And one of the most powerful things that we did was have conversations with students about the new science curriculum, which is rather similar to the math curriculum. And one young man said, I would come to school, he was an 8th grader. I'd come to school and get information from my teacher, and I'd have to memorize it and take it on a test. Now I show up and she wants to know what I think. She doesn't have the power anymore. When he said she doesn't have the power anymore, that was enough. Like, I'm not going to sleep. I'm going to be in every classroom, and I'm going to make sure this is happening so that all of our kids can say that. So yes, just listen to kids.
I'll piggyback on that because it's a continuation. That's open SciEd we're doing, and also illustrative math. So we put that out there. And I'd piggyback on that, really, regardless if you're talking about with students, with educators or families, engage and listen and continue that process, because the more we understand our blind spots, we're able to address those needs, and we can actually better support who really matters, and that's the student experience. Because if they're successful, the classroom educator feels successful, building administrator, and obviously the family is going to be successful, knowing that their child is really getting all they can, sucking the marrow out of the school system to benefit their child. So engage and listen.
I guess my ending comments. Being an educator today is hard. I don't think anybody would shy away from saying that the roles that we all hold right now are very difficult. They were difficult. The work was hard before the pandemic, only exacerbated during the pandemic, but we're coming out of it. And I do believe better days are ahead of us. What I would say, or my words of advice is, I feel during the pandemic and this year, my why as to why I became an educator, my why as to why I want to make a difference in the lives of our kids has only grown stronger. And I feel we're more determined than ever, because of what our kids have gone through, to really make sure that we stand by them during these difficult times and get them and give them every opportunity, provide them with all the access that they need. And so I guess my advice, or if I had any parting words, would be to remind educators, don't lose sight of your why. Our students, our staff our kids need our teachers more than ever, and our teachers need our principals more than ever, and our principals need our superintendent more than ever. So don't lose that sense of why. Remember why you came into this work. Remember why you do this work. And remember, you might not get that thank you today. You might not get the recognition that you deserve today, but down the road, that child is going to remember what you did for them. So don't lose that sense of why.
Thank you all. That is a wrap for Passing the Mic, and we appreciate your time.
Thank you for joining us for this edition of Passing the Mic. We encourage you to keep the conversation going and share your thoughts with us on social media using the hashtag #PassingTheMic_TNTP. We look forward to connecting with you during our next conversation. Until then, stay safe. Hello, and welcome to Passing. Whoa.